if we want people to work together, they have to trust each other and they have to feel like they are not defending themselves all the time. And so leaders must eliminate blame, and that's got to start with the leader. And I think a lot of times people resort to blame when they feel like they are going to get blamed. And until people have the psychological safety to say, you know what, when things happen, I'm not going to get blamed. My leader is just going to come to me and say, we just got to reverse engineer this and dissect this to figure out how can we get a better result next time. But I think blame starts with the leader. And when leaders come at this as, okay, something's wrong, who screwed up? You're never going to have a team that takes shared accountability.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
When performance is measured, performance improves. But when performance is reported, the rate of improvement accelerates. Accountability is one of the most critical elements of a high-performing workforce. And yet, it's also one of the most misunderstood and poorly communicated concepts in leadership today. Too often, accountability is viewed as punishment or blame rather than a positive force for ownership, alignment, and growth. So how do great leaders communicate accountability in a way that motivates, empowers, and drives results? Today's guest, Michael Timms, is here to unpack just that. Michael is a leadership and organizational culture expert and the author of How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. He helps teams build cultures of trust by redefining accountability as a shared mindset, and it all starts with how we communicate. If you are a leader trying to build a culture where accountability is embraced rather than avoided, this episode is for you. Michael, welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thanks so much, Rajat. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about communication and leadership communication and accountability.
Awesome. So, Michael, let's start a little bit about yourself. You know, you're a leading voice in workplace culture and accountability, building trust. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got interested in this topic.
Sure. Yeah. So my background is in human resources. I was a head of HR at a couple of companies at a large consulting firm. I went on my own actually because the managers that I had progressively got worse. So it started off with a really good manager, and then they just got worse and worse. And the last guy was just brutal. And I'm like, I just want to make sure that nobody feels the way that this guy is making me feel. And so I wanted to help organizations. I wanted to help, organizations really, rid themselves of bad leaders who really demoralize their employees. And on the flip side of that, teach leaders, good leaders, how to be fantastic leaders. Anyways, just the background on how I found my niche there. I specialized in succession planning at first. And one of the things that I would do, one of the the first step in succession planning is to come up with a criteria for promotion. And I would work with focus groups in my client organizations to ask them, hey, what were the key behaviors that led to your success stories? And the more stories I heard, the more I realized everybody was talking about the same thing. They were talking about accountability. And they were basically saying great leaders, number one, exemplify and model a high standard of accountability. They're able to hold others accountable in a supportive way as opposed to kind of a beat you over the head way. And they're also able to make changes within the organization to make it easier for everybody to get the right results. And so that's from making that discovery, that's when I really started to zero in and focus and research and write and teach about accountability, and have been doing that ever since.
Awesome. It's great, Michael. So like many great endeavors, it starts with a personal pain point. which you felt. So let's start right at the top, Michael. So what is accountability in a company context? How do you define it?
Well, I define accountability as taking ownership of results and focusing on what you can do to improve future results. So there's kind of two parts there. So you're taking ownership of results, not tasks, good or bad. But the other thing is focusing not on what Rajat can do, not on what Steve can do or Lauren can do. It's focusing on what I can do to improve future results. So kind of two components there to accountability.
So I love that. So if you think of those two parts, Michael, so what do most leaders usually, what are some misconceptions they have about accountability? Or, we all talk about accountability. I've been in corporate settings myself. So what do leaders get wrong about accountability when they discuss it internally?
Well, it's kind of funny because I tend to speak to CEOs.
Okay.
And senior executive groups. And when I'm speaking to these groups, it's interesting. I actually do a little bit of an experiment with them to set them up to help them see their own bias when it comes to accountability. And I'm not going to tell you how I do it in case any of those potential groups might be listening and want to bring me in. But it is interesting that every time I do this, it's revealed. They tend to have an aha moment when they realize, oh yeah, you know what? I was thinking about accountability about, if there's an accountability problem, people tend to think it's over there. It's the problem is over there. It's over there, or it's these people. They are the problem. Almost nobody thinks about accountability in terms of, oh, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe this accountability problem starts with me. And almost nobody thinks in those terms, when in reality, that is how you create a culture of accountability. When people particularly when people in leadership positions really understand the problem is not other people, the problem is you. And if you can change your own attitudes and behaviors, it actually has a significant impact, and you can dramatically improve other people's willingness to hold themselves accountable.
Okay, starts with the leader. And in your book, Michael, you talk a lot about expectation clarity. So what is expectation clarity, and why is that so fundamental to this idea of accountability?
I'm going to make a distinction between expectations and being clear on desired results.
Okay.
So expectations are around, can you and I agree, Rajat, on how you and I are going to work together? Right.
Mm-hmm.
An expectation is, hey, look, I expect that I'm going to meet my deadlines and my commitments to you. You're going to meet yours to mine. If you feel like you're not going to be able to meet one of those deadlines, I expect you to let me know well ahead of time so that we can sort of mitigate that, so that we can, in fact, make our deadlines. Or I expect you to let me know if something's not working for you. I expect you to talk to me face to face, as opposed to you talking to Sally, right? And then that's what I mean by expectations. What are the ground rules that you and I can agree to around how we're going to work together? Okay. But I'd say another key component to getting the right results is to be clear on the desired results. When I'm asking Rajat, when I'm asking you to do something, it's important for me to get clear on what is the desired outcome. Like why am I asking you to do this? Why is it important? Mm-hmm. What are the consequences if you don't achieve this desired outcome? So that's something I think is really important. We make the distinction. Expectations, critically important to getting the right results, which is how are we going to work together? Desired results are like, am I being clear on what it is I want you to deliver? Not how you are going to deliver it, but what exactly is the outcome that I'm asking you to produce?
Yeah. So talk about the why and the what, not as much the how. And then You also mentioned, Michael, when you were speaking earlier, this distinction between tasks and expectations, right? Can you just talk a little bit more about it? Because there's a lot of discussion in big companies about doing tasks, right? So you have a sharp distinction there. So what is it?
Yeah, so the distinction is really between tasks and results, and accountability is not taking ownership. So here, let's make a quick distinction here. Responsible people, we want responsible people, but to be responsible means to take ownership of tasks. I can expect that you will do what you say you're going to do, right? That's a responsible person. But accountability is taking ownership of results. I can count on you to achieve the results that I'm asking you to achieve. Okay? There's a big distinction between those two things, but we often confuse those things. And I believe it's that confusion that creates a lack of accountability. And I think a lot of people believe that they are simply responsible to complete the list of tasks on their job description or on their to-do list. And they say, you know what, I've done A, B, C, and D. I'm done. I'm out. The outcomes, Rajat, are on you, right? You're my boss. So you deal with the outcomes. That's not what we're talking about, right? Accountability is taking ownership of results. It's like, I own the outcome, good or bad, and I am responsible to achieve the outcome. I'm not responsible simply to do a set of tasks. And it dramatically changes people's behavior, because I think a lot of people believe that they are simply hired to complete a set of tasks. And you will then get that attitude of like, okay, I'm out. I've done my job. Well, no, your job is, I don't know anybody that was actually hired simply to complete a set of tasks. Everybody that I know of that has a job was employed to achieve certain results. But as leaders, we're often not clear enough on what those results are, which means we're setting people up for failure. And we're almost encouraging people not to take accountability when we don't clarify what those results are that they are accountable to achieve.
So that's great distinction, Michael. So as leaders, and there are many business leaders listening to this podcast, how can they communicate with their teams better so that they shift this dialogue more towards outcomes and instead of tasks and things that the checklist of things that needs to be done. So maybe you can tell us, what are some mistakes leaders make, and how can leaders get better at creating that culture of accountability and talking about outcomes and not tasks?
Yeah, I think one of the key first mistakes leaders make is that they get too focused on the tasks. They get too focused on the how to do things, and they forget to talk about really what is the desired outcome and why is that desired outcome important? Why does it matter? It's incredible. Once people understand what good looks like, what the result actually looks like, and they understand why it's important, you don't have to do much past that, right? They will then problem solve around the inevitable issues that come up. Here's a silly example. So, Rajat, I need you to go to the store, and I need you to get some bread, milk, and eggs and bring it back here in an hour. If I say, hey, Rajat, I need you to, and then I continue to say, so take my vehicle, go on this route, and go to this store, get bread, milk, and eggs, and be back, in an hour. If you go to my vehicle and it doesn't start, you're going to come back to me and say, sorry, Michael, I can't do what you asked me to do because your vehicle doesn't start. Or if, you head down the road and the route that I told you to go down is closed, sorry, Michael, I can't do what you asked me to do. Or the store isn't open, whatever it is, right? When I focus on the tasks, I'm creating a whole bunch of potential roadblocks for you, right? But if I just say, hey, look, Rajat, I don't care what it takes. I just need you to come back with bread, milk, and eggs an hour because we're making French toast, right? We want to have French toast, right? Then when you encounter problems, which for sure you're going to encounter problems along the way, you then it frees up your mind to problem solve around those things as they come up, because you are focused on the outcome, and you're going to do whatever it takes, obviously within reasonable guidelines, to get that result. But I think a lot of times leaders get frustrated when people come back to them and say, sorry, I can't do what you want me to do. And the leader is frustrated. Well, why can't you take the initiative to problem solve? It's because you, the leader, have not focused them on the outcome and on the why of the outcome. Why is it important? Everybody, I don't know anybody who comes to work who wants to fail. I think generally people want to succeed. And in order to succeed, they just need to know, what exactly do you want me to produce, and why is this an important thing that I should invest more than just my time and energy, but my emotional energy as well.
So let me just dig a little bit deeper, Michael, here, because I would say most leaders are aware of the difference between responsibility and accountability. There is the whole RACI framework we've learned focus on the outcomes. So in your example, or in your experience, why don't leaders use the second path of get bread, eggs, and milk for French toast? Why are they sometimes so directive and prescriptive, saying that do these tasks? What have you found? Why do leaders act in that way?
Well, I think when you think back to, heck, even our job descriptions are written in terms of, typically written in terms of tasks, right?
Yes.
Do this, these are your responsibilities, and do this and that. They're not, job descriptions would be way simpler and way less text if you just said, these are the 5 or 6 key outcomes that we have hired you to produce, and this is what you're going to be measured on. It'd be way simpler. And I think, I don't know, I think it's easier sometimes for people to think in terms of tasks, but I think partially because the people who are in leadership positions typically have been in the positions that they are now responsible for. And they are simply doing what they have done, and they're instructing you to do what they have done. And not everybody thinks the same way. And if you tell me to do things the way that you've done things, that might not be as clear to me as it is to you. And it might kind of muck me up a little bit, and I might kind of fumble because it's not. And it also takes away, maybe that's also focusing on your strengths. Maybe the way you've done that is the way it works for you because you have certain talents in a certain area, right? And it's taking away my ability to harness my own unique strengths and experiences to achieve that desired result. And my path might be better than yours, right? It might be just as good, but in fact, it actually could be even more efficient. But I think the reason for that is probably just because, well, that's just the way I've done it, and so that's what I'm going to tell you to do. That's my best guess.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because there is hidden bias. It's how I have done it, and that's what I know. And I think also a little bit about control, that you feel you can control the steps more if you're going to outline what they are. So Michael, can we zoom out from the individual to the team level? Now, as you think about teams, how can you create a sense of shared accountability? Because everyone has their own pieces they own, outcomes, but then the team also has some overall accountability. So as a leader, how do we build shared accountabilities in a team?
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I think the key thing is to, again, focus on results. What is the key result that we're all working towards?
Yeah.
The number one thing that you're going to go after that, I'd say the next thing is you need to eliminate blame. Blame is the number one killer of accountability. It kills teamwork. It kills trust. And that's why a lot of times where we have breakdowns, and when we step back and we say, why didn't we get the result that we wanted? Oftentimes it's in the handoff from one person to the next, or one team to the next. Because it's easy to say, and I think this is where our RACI charts and sometimes when we're so prescriptive on this is my responsibility and this is my responsibility, it's in the handoff. And I give you a silly example. I have 3 daughters, and they each have different jobs after dinner to clean up the kitchen. And it is amazing how many times after they have done their job that the kitchen is still a mess, because they are so prescriptive. And it's like, well, I'm just going to do, this is my narrow scope of exactly what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. And it's easy, it's easy to say, well, hey, I just did my job. And I think the key thing is that we need to help teams understand what is the desired result. I'm not asking you to, when I'm asking you to load the dishwasher, and I'm asking you to clear the table, and I'm asking you to hand wash dishes. Yes, I'm asking you, those are the jobs you're assigned, but the goal is a clean kitchen. And again, I will go back to, a lot of times leaders don't get back to that. Hey, this is the desired result. But the other thing is we have to, if we want people to work together, they have to trust each other, and they have to feel like they are not defending themselves all the time. And so leaders must eliminate blame, and that's got to start with the leader. And I think a lot of times people resort to blame when they feel like they are going to get blamed. And until people have the psychological safety to say, you know what, when things happen, I'm not going to get blamed. My leader is just going to come to me and say, we just got to reverse engineer this and dissect this to figure out how can we get a better result next time. But I think blame starts with the leader. And when leaders come at this as, okay, something's wrong, who screwed up? You're never going to have a team that takes shared accountability. So that would be the second key thing that I would say leaders need to do to encourage shared accountability.
Yeah. No, I love that idea of blame kills accountability. Maybe, Michael, you can tell us a little bit more about how can leaders communicate so that there's a culture of accountability and outcomes while not creating this culture of blame. Maybe there's a story or an example you can share. Here is a way you do it that's blaming. Here's a way you can do it, which is creates that culture of accountability.
Well, I'm going to go back to really it's around how. Okay, so here's a third tip for you around how to communicate in a way that encourages accountability, as opposed to communicating in a way that destroys accountability. And the key is to be a detective, not a judge. And one of the key problems is that people come into, a lot of time leaders come in and they see a problem, and they're immediately in their mind, whether they've actually done the analytical analysis or not, they know, well, this person screwed up. And they probably know, and they probably believe they know why. It's because they're lazy, they're careless, they're just dumb, or whatever it is. And they've already judged what has happened and why it's happened. And they're coming into it, trying to and they address the problem in that way. But the way this one mindset shift, you just come into the situation and say, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing. This is not a good result. What's going on here? Can you help me understand what are the factors that how do we get here? Right. And when you communicate in that way, how did we get here? Where did the process break down? That will free people up to, they are not feeling like they have to defend themselves, and they can actually, talk about these things in a non-defensive way, and you're going to get better results. But another thing that I would share is, again, it starts with the leader as far as they need to take ownership themselves. There's a principle of systems thinking that goes like this. If you're part of the system in which a problem was discovered, you likely contributed to that problem.
That's correct.
And a lot of times people in leadership positions don't get that. When they see a problem within their sphere of responsibility, it's always other people. They are the problem. I'm not the problem. And so a great way to encourage team accountability, especially when you're in a leadership position, is to come into a situation and say, ask this question. How may I have contributed to this problem? And to sincerely ask that question before you address it with the person who you think is responsible? And when I have asked that question myself, almost always I can find something that I have done or have not done that made it easier for that person to make the mistake, or made it easier for that person not to get the result that I wanted them to get. And it also frees me from the anger that when you see a problem, initially your amygdala is triggered, your fight or flight response is triggered, you're angry, and you're typically coming into problems frustrated. And people can feel that, they can sense that, and it's going to shut them down. It's going to make them defensive. But if you can come into a situation and you say, hey, look, this is not good. What's my part in this? And then if you can actually initiate the conversation with that individual and say, hey, look, this is not the result that we wanted. Here's my part in this. Here's what I can see, I could have done differently. What can we do to learn from this? And what are all the factors that contribute to this so that we can, make sure that this doesn't happen again? People are going to be way more likely to somehow, down the line say, you know what, actually, so I think Michael, we probably could have had a better process here. I appreciate that you probably could have done this, differently. That's great. And you know what? I probably dropped the ball too. And here's where I dropped the ball. People are going to be way more likely to come to that conclusion. If you start off holding yourself accountable and taking ownership for your part. And I think that is one of the key things that leaders do not do nearly enough of, is to take the time and say, hey, what is my part in this? And to let people see that they are first holding themselves accountable before they go in to talk to other people about, their part in problems.
That's amazing, Michael. I think I love the two things you said. One about don't be a judge. It's easy as a CEO myself, it's easy to think you know the situation, know the answer, and take that detective approach and how I might have caused this issue or the situation. Both are great insights. So what are the signs, Michael, that a leader or a team struggles with accountability? And so what are some of the signs and how can they course correct?
Well, the number one sign is this, right? When people are pointing their fingers at each other, that is the number one sign that you have an accountability problem, that nobody is willing to say, hey, you know what? I could do better. And this is what I'll do better. And this is me focusing on what I can do to improve. When everybody's focused on what everybody else can do to improve, that's an accountability problem. And the very first place you should look as a leader is yourself. You should be looking in the mirror. Why do people feel that they need to protect themselves? Right? And blaming other people is simply a protection mechanism. Why do people on your team feel that they need to protect themselves? And oftentimes the answer is because you as a leader are coming at problems as a judge. You have already decided what the problem is and who is to blame. Right? And that is why people feel like, well, I've got to find another scapegoat. And it's those idiots over there. It's their fault. So I'd say the number one sign, that you have an accountability problem is when there is blame. I'd say and how you resolve that is as a leader, is looking at your own behavior, your own words. Are you the source of the blame? Does it start with you? Because any little thing you do as a leader gets extremely amplified. Another sign that you have an accountability problem is almost kind of the opposite, where deadlines are not being met, quality standards are not being met, and people feel too safe, like there are no consequences. That is your other key sign that there's an accountability problem, is that when people completely blow past deadlines and have zero regard for quality standards. That again, why would that be? It goes back to the leader, because the leader is not being either clear enough on the standards and or not being firm enough on consequences. I think consequences doesn't mean like we need to fire people, but it means, am I addressing this directly? And that's the solution to that other the other problem of missing deadlines, things. Am I addressing this problem directly? And most leaders struggle in this area. They think that they're being direct, but really they're talking around the issue. They're trying to sugarcoat it, and when they're trying, or you know what, let's have a team meeting. I'm just going to have a team meeting and say, we're missing deadlines. No, that's not being direct, right? Being direct is talking to the individual and saying, hey, what happened here? You missed this deadline. That's not okay. But hey, am I part of the problem? Is you missing the deadline? Am I doing anything that's making it easier or for you to miss deadlines? Is there something else I could do to make it easier for you to hit the deadlines? But I'll tell you what, we cannot miss deadlines again. And if you do miss a deadline again, this is going to be the consequence. So let's problem solve right now. What can I do to help you? What can I do differently? Like, I'm in this. Like, I've got your back. But as an organization, as a leader, I cannot accept poor quality work. I cannot accept missed deadlines. What can we do differently going forward to make sure that this doesn't happen again? That's being direct, and that's really the attitude I think that the leaders need to have. So, anyways, those are two signs. One is there's a lack of two signs of a lack of accountability. One is that there's a lot of blame. The other is that people are not hitting standards, and those are the two ways that leaders can address both of those issues.
Yeah, I loved how you hit both ends of the spectrum, Michael. It could be too much of blame or things are too soft. And I'm definitely going to use this tip myself in my next conversation, is how I might have contributed to the situation or to the issue. And you're right, it opens other people's up. It becomes more of a problem-solving discussion than a blame game, right? How things can be improved. So, all right, let's wrap, Michael, with if you had to share one mindset shift, right? And we talked about asking ourselves the question that every leader could use to drive accountability in themselves or in their teams. What would the suggestion be?
One mindset shift. If you are part of the system in which a problem was discovered, you likely contributed to the problem. That's the one mindset shift that everybody needs to adopt, especially the leader. They need to start with that, right? Which I call look in the mirror.
Love it. Love that. All right, Michael, let's go to our quick fire. So I'll ask you 5 questions about business communication. And the first phrase or word that comes to your mind, just you can just share that with us, right? Ready?
Sure.
Okay. So, Michael, what's one word you would use to describe the art of communication?
I'd have to say clarity, but that's so vague. But clarity.
Clarity. Okay. How is AI changing the way we communicate?
AI is fantastic. I love it's the sorry. One word?
One phrase, a phrase or a sentence, that's fine. Yeah.
It is making us clearer.
Okay.
Or more clear.
Okay. So if you could give one piece of advice, Michael, to someone in a large company preparing for a big presentation, to, let's say, a group of senior executives, what is that piece of advice you would give?
Well, since you got me thinking about, okay, I'm going to give two pieces of advice.
Mm-hmm.
One is state your purpose up front. What is the ask? So it's inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. Okay, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, I would for sure use AI to say, how can I say this to keep the details, to keep the important details, but reduce the amount of text. Those are my 2 top tips for you about presenting.
Okay, great. And what is something, Michael, you wish you knew about business communication when you started your career?
I would say taking ownership makes you stronger, not weaker.
Fair enough. And then what is the most common mistake you see people make when they're trying to communicate in a business setting?
It's probably that first thing that most people in a business setting communicate using deductive reasoning, which is I'm going to give you all the details and then I'm going to tell you what I really want to tell you, the main summary point at the end. That is the exact opposite of how you want to communicate. You want to start off with what is the key here? What am I asking you? What is the big ask, right? And here's why I think this.
Yeah, we of course at Prezent agree with that, Michael, because at Prezent itself, every member on our platform creates a fingerprint of how they like to be communicated to. And based on hundreds of thousands of people in the enterprise, we have learned that 86% of executives prefer the inductive style. So they like to hear the answer first. There are corner cases with people who've grown up in head of engineering, R&D kind of roles, who like to see the proof. But 86% of execs are inductive. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So Michael, thank you so much. I mean, this was an amazing conversation, helping all of us reframe the way we think and talk about accountability. And you've shown us that accountability is not just about control. It's about clarity, commitment, communication, and also vulnerability. So before we wrap up, any final thoughts, Michael, on the topic of accountability, or any resources you'd like to share with leaders if they want to inspire this culture of ownership? And where can they also learn more about your work?
Yeah, thanks, Rajat. I would say if you want a quick summary of my philosophy around accountability, check out my TED Talk, How to Claim Your Leadership Power. So check that out. It's like 11 minutes, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And I think it's a easy, shareable link, right? Another is, if you'd like a deeper dive on that, check out my book, How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. So you can get that. You can get that anywhere, but typically on Amazon is usually the best place. So those would be a couple of places you can check out, or you can simply Google Michael Timms.
So Michael, we'll be sure to put the links to the TED Talk and the book in the show notes so that our viewers have access to it. So thank you again, Michael, for joining us on this episode of Think Deeply, Speak Simply. Next week, we'll continue exploring the intersection of leadership and communication with another expert voice. Until then, let's think deeply and speak simply. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit Prezent.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.